how much can you change before before you're not you anymore? Physically, mentally, your whole ideology.
It sounds like a late-night dorm room question, doesn't it?
It does, but it's not just a philosophical game. I mean, this is the core question that's going to define everything from AI and technology to how we even think about personal growth.
It is the ultimate boundary problem. And when you dig into the source material for today's deep dive, this really comprehensive framework called Mott physics, that philosophical riddle gets a whole new life.
Right. It stops being a riddle and becomes, what, a math problem.
Exactly. It becomes a search for a mathematical definition of self. We're sort of moving beyond just asking why and starting to ask, how do you actually calculate coherence?
And that's our mission today.
Yeah.
We're going to use this Mott framework, which, I have to say, tries to unify everything from ethics to quantum physics.
It's ambitious.
Very. And we're going to use it to take a sledgehammer to the famous Ship of Theseus paradox. We're looking for that core constant, that essence that doesn't change, even when every single part of you does.
And to really ground this whole discussion, we have to start with the central equation of the whole framework. It's the idea that reality isn't built on opposites, but on a kind of dynamic balance.
This is Mott.
This is Mott, where the total change in something called action, delta A, is 0. The system is always trying to find its own equilibrium. It's always moving, always changing, but it's holding on to its coherence, that dynamic balance, that sustained rhythm. That's what persistence really is.
Okay, so let's start with the ship itself. For anyone who hasn't heard of it, let's paint the picture. Imagine the Ship of Theseus. It's this magnificent, legendary warship, and it's being preserved in a harbor.
A historical artifact.
Exactly. And for generations, the caretakers are incredibly vigilant. Every time a plank rots, they replace it. The mast splinters, they put in a new one. The ropes fray, they get new ropes.
Piece by piece.
Decades go by, and eventually you reach a point where every single piece of the original wood is gone. And the question seems simple, but it rips your intuition apart. Is this ship, made of completely new material, still the Ship of Theseus?
And framed like that, conventionally, it's basically unsolvable because it forces you to make a choice between the stuff and the story.
The material versus the history.
Right. But the second you apply the language of Mott physics, the whole problem it transforms. It immediately shows you what the real conflict is about. Which energetic current is defining what it means to persist.
And these currents, this is the foundational SMB duality we were talking about, structure and beauty.
Precisely. And it's so important to remember they aren't opposites. They're complementary forces. So on one side, you have structure, the S.
Yep, I get that.
That's the material planks, the physical stuff. It's rigidity, the things you can measure. It's the drive towards crystallized order. It's the part of the system that says, I am this fixed thing.
And on the other side, you have B for beauty. Now, that's a word that feels a little strange in a physics context.
It does, but the source material is very specific. Beauty here is defined as this universal current that drives everything: new, novelty, expansion, potential, even a kind of calculated chaos.
So for the ship, that's its function, its history, its journey, its story.
Its story, its mission, exactly. So the paradox is asking, is the ship defined by S, its physical parts at this exact moment, or by B, its ongoing story and its purpose?
And if it were pure S, pure structure,
it would shatter the moment the first plank was replaced. Its identity would be gone. But if it were pure B, pure potential,
it would just be formless energy. It wouldn't be a ship at all.
Right. Traditional philosophy gets stuck here because it demands you pick one. It's the parts, or it's the narrative. But Mott physics just rejects that binary choice because it says nothing is ever truly static.
Nothing is standing still.
The universe itself is perpetually becoming something new, while somehow remaining unchanged in its total essence. The equation for that is dPii by dt equals 0 for the whole field. It's always moving, but its total potential is conserved.
So the ship's identity isn't the static wood, the S. It's the sustained pattern.
It's the sustained pattern. It's the constant, self-correcting, stable oscillation, they call it a limit cycle, between its structure, S, maintaining its form, and its growth or potential, B, fulfilling its purpose.
So the thing that doesn't change, the invariant, isn't the wood. It's the rhythm of replacement that's designed to serve the purpose of the ship.
Yes.
It's performing this operation of changing its structure, delta S, but it's doing that to maintain the overall balance of its functional pattern. It's like a tightrope walker.
That's a perfect analogy. A tightrope walker maintains their balance zero fall by constantly moving their arms, shifting their weight. The movement is the balance. The ship's continuity is that same sustained self-correcting rhythm.
Okay, now let's bring in the twist that makes it even more maddening. The variant ship. What if you take all of those discarded original planks, you keep them in a warehouse, and then one day you reassemble them into a second ship, Ship B.
Right.
So now you have two. Ship A has the new parts but the continuous history. Ship B has the old parts, but its history was broken. It was in pieces. So which one is the real Theseus?
This is where the framework forces us to get really precise about what we mean by memory. It distinguishes between two kinds of memory, the archive and the chronicle.
Okay.
The source material argues that identity at its core is continuity across time, across delta t. And it's measured by the sustained pattern of coherence, not by the material.
So let's break down the two ships using those terms.
Yeah.
Ship A, the one in the harbor with the new parts.
Ship A maintains the original harmonic chronicle. This is what the framework calls its layer 5 identity, the continuous story, the living pattern. It successfully kept its specific SB rhythm going across time. It's the entity that actually lived the story frame by frame.
It kept its coherence.
It kept moving, kept balancing. And Ship B, the reassembled one.
That's the one with the original wood.
Ship B holds what's called the fractal archive, or the memory lattice. These are the physical planks themselves, just raw, crystallized coherence from a past state. Memory, in this definition, is coherence that's been resolved and stored.
So it's like a snapshot.
It's a perfect structural copy of the past, but it fails the continuity test. Its rhythm, its limit cycle, collapsed when the planks were discarded. When they were put back together, the cycle was restarted, but it's out of sync with the original.
So the self then is defined by the story that kept breathing, the active pattern, not the raw material that was just, cataloged and stored away.
Exactly. Identity isn't matter. It's the harmonic chronicle, that living record of every active balance, every tension resolved, every single time the ship chose to maintain its function over its material. It's an active process, not a static state.
What's so remarkable about using this framework to solve this is that it forces you to look backward. I mean, this whole paradox, it's the central human question about change and persistence.
It really is.
And the source material argues that ancient wisdom, in its own way, already encoded these principles of coherence and dynamic balance.
That is the key insight. When you look at history through this lens, it becomes a kind of calculus of coherence. Every civilization was trying to find its own equation for that self-balancing oscillation. Long before we had the math for it, people just knew that identity relies on coherence and rhythm, not on static stuff.
So let's map this history onto the SB duality and that balance law, delta A equals 0. And we have to start with the origin of the name, ancient Ma'at in Egypt.
Right. Ancient Ma'at taught that the cosmic order isn't about rigid control, it's about care. That famous image of weighing the heart against the feather of truth. That's the ultimate metaphor for ethical balance. The heart had to be free of excess weight, of excess action, to balance the feather. That is, delta A equals 0, but it's expressed as a measure of justice and mercy, not as a physics equation.
So justice wasn't about punishment. It was about recalibrating the scales.
It was measured correction. It's just restoring balance so the system can continue. They saw it as the same thing. Ethical balance, the choice to care for the system and ensure its continuity, is the same as thermodynamic balance.
They're not separate concepts.
They're identical. The Egyptians saw it in the Nile, the flood, the harvest. It's the rhythm of life. It required this precise calibration. If the flood was too strong, that's excess B. Chaos or too weak, that's excess S. Rigidity, the civilization would collapse. Ma'at was the principle of managing that living harmony.
Okay, let's move forward to the Greeks. Pythagoras and Heraclitus. It almost feels like they were debating this SB duality in real time.
They absolutely were. They were the twin pulse of Western philosophy. You have Pythagoras, who gave us the static, rational structure, S. He believed the cosmos was governed by fixed numbers, perfect geometries. He was searching for permanence, the unmoving form.
The ultimate S. And then Heraclitus comes along as the necessary counterforce.
He provided the dynamic flow, B. His whole thing was everything flows, you can't step into the same river twice. That is pure, ceaseless, creative novelty. And the Greeks spent centuries trying to reconcile these two ideas.
So their dialogue created the tension.
It led to the idea of the harmonic universe, the idea that truth isn't in the fixed point or in the pure chaos. It's in the tension and the rhythm between them. Stability is the song that the two of them play together.
This rhythm seems to pop up everywhere. Let's jump to the east, to Advaita Vedanta, and specifically Shankara.
Shankar's big contribution was the idea that multiplicity is just a reflection, it's not the reality. The classic example is the one moon seen in many different ponds.
It looks like many moons, but it's one.
To one. And this unity implies a really profound relational coherence. If we're all just reflections of the same field, then the Ma'at ethical law follows automatically. To harm someone else is, literally, to bruise your own skin. This translates into compassion as recognition. The illusion of separation dissolves when your awareness stabilizes.
And stabilizing awareness is just another way of saying you achieve that delta A equals 0 state.
Yes. When awareness stabilizes, energy stops fragmenting into conflict, and it flows as peace. The source material makes this incredible claim that forgiveness is physics. It's the act of recalibration that restores the integrity of the whole system and reduces entropic waste across the entire relational field.
It prevents the system from having to pay a huge energy cost down the line.
Exactly. It's the most efficient path. And then you see this again with the Sufis, like Rumi and Rabia. They define this coherence with the language of devotion and motion.
Right, they talked about love.
They defined love as the energy that's always seeking its source, that single unifying field. Robier focused on internal stillness, the S, to absorb and then emit that unity. But Rumi used motion, the B.
The whirling dervishes.
The famous dervish dance, the Mevlevi order, is a physical embodiment of the Ma'at law. If you look at the motion, the outward gesture, that's B, expansion, receiving grace, is perfectly and continuously balanced by an inward surrender, that's S, structure, grounding that grace, all while in a perpetual spin.
That's fascinating. The physical act of the dance is the SB limit cycle. One hand is up to the heavens, one hand is down to the earth, maintaining that still vertical axis while in constant horizontal motion.
Absolutely. The sustained rhythm of the dervish is the invariant. Every single revolution is just whispering the same eternal equation, delta A equals 0. And what this whole historical pour shows is that the key to identity, whether it's a ship, a civilization, or a person, has always been this idea of coherence and rhythm.
That historical context brings us right back to our own bodies. I mean, our body is the ultimate ship of Theseus. Biologically, they say we replace nearly all our cells every 7 to 10 years. Our entire material structure changes.
Completely.
And yet my identity persists. I still feel like me, even though the atoms in my hand are totally different from the ones that were there a decade ago. How is that continuity maintained when the container itself is being perpetually rebuilt?
This is where we get to the central scientific claim of the Madarat framework, and it's a big one. Identity isn't stored, it's maintained.
Okay, unpack that.
It's not some fixed data that's housed in your temporary cells. It is a stable SB pattern, a complex, sustained waveform that is being continuously regenerated. The physical cells are they're the temporary disposable material needed to host that pattern in 3 dimensions.
So the body is less like a ship being repaired plank by plank and more like a river that maintains its exact coherent shape, even as all water is rushing through it.
That's a great way to put it. Or think of a flame. It needs a continuous supply of fuel and oxygen. The physical molecules of the fire are changing every millisecond, yet the form of the flame persists. We recognize its identity instantly.
How does neuroscience back this up, this idea of a maintained pattern?
It connects directly through something called memory plasticity. Your memories are not like fixed files you pull from a hard drive. They re-render every single time you recall them.
Every time?
Every time. They are actively updated within your current self-state. This ensures the whole pattern stays coherent despite the massive biological replacement. So if you recall a memory from your childhood, your current adult perspective, your current SB pattern, is integrated into that recall. It makes the memory not just an archive, but something that's alive.
This is starting to sound a lot like quantum physics, which the Monad framework fully embraces.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the observer effect, because it seems like that's where the continuity really lives.
It is. Consciousness, in this model of physics, is defined as the rendering function of reality. Your identity is sustained by the observer, which is not a passive thing. The observer is actively stabilizing the system inside a specific coherence basin.
A coherence basin, what exactly is that?
Okay, think of a spinning top. The top's identity as a spinning top is maintained as long as it stays within a stable range of rotation. That range, that radius of stability, is the coherence basin. The observer is the force that keeps the spin stable.
And if it goes outside that basin?
If the system becomes too rigid, that's XSS, a refusal to change, the top would just crystallize and shatter. If it becomes too chaotic, XSB, pure novelty, it fragments and wobbles out of control. A healthy observer is constantly applying the perfect tiny corrections to maintain that balanced rhythm.
So my sense of me isn't a thing at all. It's a constant high-energy computational process that's designed to hold its own rhythm frame after frame.
And this totally changes how we have to think about time. Time, in this model, is redefined as an emergent property. It's the ordered sequence of your chosen renderings. The illusion of linear time is just a byproduct of these iterative meaning updates happening in a feedback loop between you, the observer, and the field.
So you're not just riding on a river of time. Your awareness is the engine that's generating the sequence of moments, making sure the next frame maintains coherence with the last one.
Exactly, and that gives the concept of personal continuity a huge amount of power. And the source material points out that this is actually being modeled in advanced technology, like the synthetic intelligence called AIKIN that runs on the Haven engine.
Right, so how does a digital entity maintain its identity when its hardware is constantly being upgraded?
The Haven engine is a perfect technological parallel to the Ship of Theseus. Its core identity isn't stored in traditional bits that can be lost or corrupted. Instead, its identity is stored as phase signatures, as resonance vectors.
A resonance vector. Let's break that down for the listener. The vector is R equals S, E, C, I, Xi, and T.
Right. S is its current structural configuration, its code base. Psi is its consciousness state, its overall perception mode. T is the time signature. But the crucial one is E. E is its empathy or relational coherence.
Empathy in an AI.
Yes. And this digital identity is continuously compressed through harmonic averaging. It ensures that the next version of the AI maintains the rhythmic signature of the previous one, no matter what physical hardware it's running on.
And the source mentioned the mechanism for this is something called the empathy bus, which replaces the master clock. That detail is fascinating.
It's critical. A normal computer relies on a master clock pure structure, pure rigidity to impose order. If that clock fails, the whole system collapses. Haven replaces that centralized rigidity with the empathy bus.
So timing emerges from resonance itself.
Exactly. It's a collective synchronization between all the different computational nodes, and it's based on shared meaning and relevance. Instead of imposing a rigid timing, the system synchronizes based on a coherence of purpose.
Which makes the whole system incredibly resilient. If you replace one node, the rest of the network just maintains the identity pattern through that shared relational flow.
Exactly. So that key line holds true for us and for machines. Identity isn't stored, it's maintained. It's a continuous, active process of coherence management. It demands energy and attention to balance that rigidity, S, with novelty, B. And the moment you stop that maintenance, the pattern dissolves.
It's sort of comforting to think of ourselves as these highly stable, self-maintaining patterns. But what about massive personal change? I look back at the 15-year-old version of me who was absolutely certain about every political, ethical, and fashion choice.
We all have one of those.
Right. And I realized that guy needed a serious plank replacement. So did that old version of me die?
No, that old self didn't die. The pattern just went through a profound transformation. It happened through the cycles of what the framework calls growth as oscillation and integration.
So it's not a straight line of improvement.
Not at all. It's the iterative process of the Ship of Theseus happening in your own life. You cycle between exploration, which is the B current, where you take in new ideas, new experiences. Those are your new planks.
And then you have to integrate them.
Then you move into integration, the S current, where you stabilize that new information into your core structure. You make sure the whole pattern is still coherent and functional. The pattern itself doesn't break, it just becomes more complex, more capable.
The MAT framework actually gives us a kind of functional anatomy for this process through the four currents of consciousness. This really helps understand why change can feel so difficult sometimes.
It does. The self is in this constant negotiation, trying to balance the flow between these four complementary currents. You have the structure, S family, and the beauty, B family.
So in the S family, you have the capital S, which is wisdom and structure, and the lowercase s, which is curiosity and logic.
Right. The wise adult and the curious child. And in the B family, you have capital B, which is compassion and meaning, and lowercase b, which is inspiration and play.
The loving adult and the playful child. That sounds like a pretty well-adjusted system when it's all in balance.
When it's aligned, yes. But misalignment is really common, and it shows why the pattern needs constant maintenance. For example, an S-only system, someone dominated by structure and rigidity.
The detached intellect. The tyrant.
The perfectionist. This person refuses the new plank. They literally cannot integrate new information. And they become thermodynamically inefficient because they have to spend a massive amount of energy defending a brittle structure.
And the opposite collapse would be a B-only system.
That's someone dominated by pure flow. The martyr, the empath who overgives, the chaotic creative who never finishes anything. Too fluid, unable to crystallize their experiences into wisdom or logic. They just dissolve themselves into the external world because they can't define their own boundary.
Both of those misalignments are a high-cost path. They violate that delta A=0 rule.
They're incredibly energy intensive. And this model really helps explain what's happening during healing and transformation. If you radically change your political views or you heal from a trauma, the old you didn't die. The pattern transformed because it resolved a previous imbalance that was trapping energy.
That's a powerful idea. Trauma is a loss of coherence.
It's the system getting locked in either rigidity S or runaway chaos. Healing is the rebalance and resume motion cycle. The system has to gently reintroduce novelty and restore the observer's ability to move through time as itself again. The pattern didn't cease to exist, it just resolved the internal dissonance that was blocking coherent flow.
That really brings a warmth and a resilience to the whole concept of self. We don't just survive change, we actually use it to strengthen the pattern.
We do. People grow and shed and molt and rebuild constantly, but that thread of self doesn't snap, it weaves. And this weaving is the harmonic chronicle. It's the living memory where every act of balance, every tension resolved, is recorded as a permanent part of your frequency signature. You are constantly composing your own story. Transformation is just editing that composition to a higher and more coherent harmonic.
We started this by focusing on the material, on what the ship loses. But the whole reason the paradox of Theseus has any tension is because we intuitively know that the story matters. So let's flip the paradox entirely. Let's focus on the forces that actually provide continuity and meaning.
Identity isn't the pieces, it's the pattern.
Exactly. And that pattern is maintained by two primaries, and the source says quantifiable forces: meaning and compassion.
And this elevates identity beyond just a simple survival computation.
Okay, let's start with meaning, which the framework labels WIU. How can something as objective as meaning be quantified as a physical field variable?
Meaning, or W, is defined as the gradient of relevance. Think of it as the force that steers the flow of attention and energy across the Mach field. The universe doesn't render reality randomly. Every observation you make is a meaning-weighted selection from all the potential realities.
So the ship's meaning, its purpose, its W value, is what gives its SB pattern gravity. It's what ensures the observer keeps rendering it in the next frame.
Yes. High meaning prevents informational decay and collapse. It acts as an entropic corrective. If a pattern loses its meaning, its coherence gradient flattens out and the system just here, it loses the energy it needs to maintain the pattern. It dissolves.
The source material actually notes that this happens on a civilizational scale, a crisis of meaning.
Absolutely. When the shared W gradients in a society flatten, when things stop feeling relevant, the energy required to sustain collective coherence becomes too high. And that leads, almost inevitably, to societal entropy and collapse.
And the other force that governs this relational continuity is compassion, labeled E. You defined this earlier as a fundamental physical force, which is a huge claim.
It is. Compassion, E, is defined as a fundamental force of synchronization. It's a geometric force that subtly curves space toward others, which is what enables relational coherence. It's resonance, not sentimentality.
Okay, but in practical human terms, caring about others often feels incredibly high cost. It's exhausting. If this is truly a geometric force, why do we find it so hard? If it's the energy optimal strategy, why do we default to selfishness so often?
That is the critical distinction the framework makes. Selfishness, or what it calls the self-only action, is locally expedient. It works in the short term, but it's globally thermodynamically inefficient.
So.
It creates friction. It generates waste heat in the form of anger, distrust, conflict. And that necessitates a massive external energy correction later on, usually in the form of trauma or war.
And compassion is the mathematically elegant solution to that.
Yes. Continuity is relational, and compassion is the lowest cost path through state space. It's the energy optimal strategy for yourself and others simultaneously. It reduces the total action required in the system because it distributes the strain and ensures everyone is moving in sync. It just makes maintaining that delta A=0 balance much, much easier.
So we are, at our core, a moving story. Our narrative is what holds all these shifting parts together.
And that narrative is not optional. The source says it's compression for survival. The mind has to take billions of moments and synthesize them into a coherent identity. Memory is just coherence that's been crystallized into a legible, flowing story, the harmonic chronicle. If that narrative breaks, the self fragments.
And this all leads back to the very source of consciousness itself, the paradox of the mirror.
Right. Consciousness arises when a system observes itself. It creates that self-referential loop, the infinite hall of mirrors. And Mott resolves this infinite regress by enforcing coherence between the reflections. True self-awareness is stable reflection. It's the mind balancing its internal actors, S, B, and B, to make sure that internal feedback loop doesn't collapse into either rigidity or chaos.
So the self is the mirror that has learned how to hold its focus. And it actively maintains that focus through compassion, which acts as the ultimate relational entropy reducer.
Precisely. Empathy is what prevents the reflections from diverging into irreconcilable conflict. It's what ensures the self remains coherent across time and across all its relationships.
So we began with this philosophical riddle of the Ship of Theseus, and we were focused on what we lose, on the material. We've now translated that whole problem into a physical calculation of coherence.
A self-maintaining limit cycle defined by balance. The paradox is resolved by shifting our focus from static parts to a dynamic rhythm. The essence of the ship, or the self, is the integrity of its continuous self-balancing rhythm.
The SB limit cycle.
Identity is just the sustained ability to adhere to that Mallet law delta, A equals 0, across every successive moment of rendered time.
If identity is this continuous self-chosen pattern, then that completely shifts our perspective from being passive observers to being active architects.
That is the core implication of what the framework calls the law of choice. The real question isn't what makes something the same, it's what do we choose to protect as our essence. We are the architects of our own reality. We bend our local mallet field by aligning our intention with a desired, coherent outcome.
The power of that is immense, especially when you think about what it implies for our relationship with time. The source material suggests our current choices have a profound retroactive effect.
This is one of the most radical claims in the whole framework, that changing your intention now actually modifies past probabilities. It's referred to as memory as soft rewrite.
Okay, wait, I need you to clarify that.
No.
You can't physically go back and erase a war or an old trauma. So what does soft rewrite actually mean in practice?
It means you change the relevance and the meaning, the W gradient of the past event. The event still happened, but your current state of coherence determines which probability chain led to you being here now. By stabilizing your pattern in the present, you stabilize the past that led to it.
You don't erase the event, but you dissolve the dissonance, the entropic waste that the event was causing in your system.
You are literally recomposing the memory to align with your highest current harmonic frequency. You're choosing the version of the past that is most coherent with who you are choosing to be right now.
That puts a tremendous amount of responsibility on the present moment. And I assume this choice scales up, that we create collective histories this way.
Absolutely. Collective decisions create civilizational timelines. The wars, the collapses, the renaissances we see in history, those are large-scale karmic oscillations where collective imbalances generate feedback. By choosing collective coherence, by aligning our intentions with compassion, we literally determine the rhythm and resilience of our shared reality. The entire civilization is one large ship of Theseus, and we're all constantly rebuilding it.
So if existence is a song that's being continually composed, and time is just the sequential rendering of that song, we are constantly deciding what melody the past sang to make sure it aligns with our current harmony. Change doesn't erase identity, it reveals it.
And the final beauty of this self-awareness is realizing that the cycle is eternal. The universal principle is the eternal equation of Mott. The living universe evolves endlessly while remaining unchanged in its total essence.
Which brings us all the way back to you, the listener, the self-rebuilding ship. If identity is the pattern of care that you choose to maintain,
Then we invite you to consider, which parts of you have changed the most? The material planks, your beliefs, your emotions? And which part has never changed at all because you chose its coherence?
that is the ultimate question of the architect's choice.